I think part of what you did with Unrivaled that made it so successful is it's a league by the players for the players. And part of what you did was giving out equity. And that's hugely important too. You are a brand new startup. You're able to do things differently. How important was that, do you think?
Very.
Yeah.
I think it was key because the athletes have heard their entire lives, we've invested in you for decades, and we didn't make money, and we are carrying so many losses. And yet these athletes have worked really, really hard their whole lives to be the best in the world. So to give them immediate equity into what they're building is the fair thing to do. And the athletes responded very, very well. Of course, everything that we did to grow the business, they were beneficiaries, and they were very intentional about this.
Jessica, I think a big part of it too, though, is telling stories and getting content out there. It makes us care about all of them. It makes us want to follow them and cheer for them. How do you do that? How important of a role is that? And how has it changed with social media?
Your story about being 10 years old and going to this incredible event and having sort of a see it, be it moment really resonates with me, because storytelling is a crucial mechanism to provide see it, be it. There is a cycle that exists, and a lot of people here, and maybe who are watching will know this cycle, but there's a very specific cycle that exists in women's sports where if at the time when Together launched, only 4% of total sports media coverage was dedicated to women's sports, it is incredibly hard to grow the audience around that category as a whole. If you work at a team or a league, maybe you're in the interest of eyeballs, putting people in seats, that's a challenge. And if there's no audience to be had, then brands are hesitant to invest in the space because they don't believe it's worth their ROI. They're not going to reach the people they need to reach at scale. And if brands aren't investing in this space, then media companies, legacy media companies in particular, don't tell these incredible stories. So we were launched with the mission of making women's sports visible, cool, powerful through authentic storytelling. And we know that storytelling it builds community, and it drives investment, which lifts the space overall.
I mean, we should probably point out that you started as a journalist, so you came to the storytelling from that angle of things. But I think about it like with NBC. The reason I care about sports I've never heard of, people I've never heard about in the Olympics, is they tell the stories so well. Mm-hmm. And I'll care about curling, and I'll care about fencing, and I will follow, and I kind of cry along the way. Could you have done this before there was social media?
I think it would be incredibly challenging. I mean, the media's town square has no walls anymore, which allows you to reach really deep ecosystems and communities and audience, and in particular fans of women's sports. You're not trying to boil the ocean. You can be very thoughtful about what stories you're telling, where you're telling them, and how you're amplifying them. Storytelling for me is, if every day we wake up together and we say, we're thinking to ourselves, whether it's short form on social, mid form, premium content, wherever it's living, can I make you think and can I make you feel? Mm-hmm. So tapping into IQ, EQ, really leaning into identity and authenticity, representing in particular our community's experiences through their own personal identities is crucial to us, and also representation of the athlete experience. We're also athlete co-founded, so really leaning into that authenticity and speaking to our audience in the right way is really important.
Micky, I think that was pretty important for Unrivaled too, because a lot of times in the off season you would have these players going to Europe, going to other places to try and supplement their income. But here you brought more than 30 of the biggest stars together for a couple of months, all living in the same space. And it kept their brand and their interactions with each other, kind of amplifying things from that perspective, and kept them in the public's eye in the off season. I mean,
totally.
That had to be part of your focus, was the storytelling aspect.
Absolutely, it was central, the content, telling those athlete stories. And after the season, the aggregate growth of player followers was 1 million. And you can, having been around sports for a long time, the engagement level was huge in in Unrivaled. And as I said to you, Becky, before, we always go back to the NBC example. How do you introduce athletes, exceptional people, into an audience, before and during the Olympics? How do you make those competitions meaningful? Those athlete stories have to be told. And Stacey Allister, who's in the audience, and I would say this, guys, we need to tell the athlete stories. Look at what NBC did in Brazil and in London and in Munich, and in every 4 years, NBC would invest probably as much money in telling those athlete stories as they did in the rights.
Yeah.
And people would laugh at us because do you know how much money that costs? And that is what digital media has enabled us to do.
The whole idea of everyone watches women's sports, that tapped such a nerve. Why do you think it went viral?
There's this tired rhetoric that's been in women's sports for a long, long time, which is, and it's usually a keyboard warrior, we call them, just like someone who, for no better reason, just wants something to say. And the rhetoric has been that no one watches women's sports. And our team, we've activated all these major sport tent poles, Final Four year over year. And in 2023, we are at the Final Four as a team. And watching the fan experience, the brand investment that was coming in that year, the viewership records, the sold out arenas, we just sort of looked at each other and we were like, you can't say no one watches women's sports. It's not true. Also, we don't want to continue to fuel that narrative. It's everyone watches women's sports. Let's make that the anthem for women's sports. Yes, internally as a company, but for this community who's known that to be true for so long. We also know that there's a huge opportunity for women's sports consumer products too. The white space that we saw with storytelling and visibility whenever we launched in 2021 certainly still exists. That white space exists for women's sports consumer products now. It's a $4 billion industry that is largely untapped. Women's sports fans are some of the most engaged, supportive, loyal fan bases and communities that you can reach, and they want more. They want more content, they want more experiences, they want more products, they want validation too of their experience. So it was intentional for us to create a unifying anthem, which was everyone watches women's sports, but also put it on a really high quality t-shirt that sort of accurately and coolly represented that slogan, what we knew to be true. And we've had some incredible people support that message